So now we're going to cover the creation of torso base. First, we're going to touch on the pattern creation for this guy, then the paint work that needs to be done, followed up by the last part, gluing the seam here to give this a bit of a curve like it has. So now I'm going to cut out the pattern pieces for the torso base. There is 3 pieces to it. There's a top, a middle, and a bottom. And one thing you'll notice is on each piece there's a line with X's on there. This line with X's is to be used for once the pieces are cut out, you'll use those X's to line up each piece and tape them together. So when you're cutting the top and the bottom out, cut along the outside line. Don't cut on the line with the X's. You want that little bit of excess paper there to tape the pieces together. So now I will cut these out and put them together. So now I have the pattern pieces all taped together for the torso base. As with a lot of other pattern pieces, this will be for the left and the right side. You will see there is a center line on this guy. So when you lay this down, you'll trace this out for one side, flip it over, and do the same thing. You want it right along the edge here when tracing the two sides out, so you have one full piece when you cut it out. One thing you'll notice is there's a bit of a taper here. This is all a straight line here, but then this cuts off and will basically create a Y in the pattern piece up at the top. That is intentional because later what will happen is once you cut the whole piece out, that split will be glued together to give a bit of a curve to the actual torso piece. Now I've got the torso base cut out. You'll see here up at the top, there's that V that I was talking about in the piece. So before you actually glue that V together to give the piece a bit of a curve, you're going to want to paint it. As you can see here, I've got a subtle texture design on this guy. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to want to heat seal this whole thing with your heat gun, and then you will take your texture pattern. Here I used anti-slip floor mat material and lay it down here squarely. You can see it's a rectangular design, and so I went with basically a 90-degree angle to the pattern. I didn't want to do like a 45 because it wouldn't give the design that I was looking for in doing this. So be mindful of how you lay your stencil down. Also, when you lay this down, you want to spray some Super 77 adhesive or some other spray adhesive on the back and give it some time to cure so it's only tacky, so it'll leave a minimal amount of residue or no residue once you're done spraying this. And the reason why I do this is because it's very easy for there to be uneven spots where the stencil isn't laying fully flat. And if your stencil isn't laying fully flat, let me do an exaggerated example here, is if this isn't laying fully flat, when you go in here to spray this with whatever spray you decide to use, it's going to be uneven. The stencil will not show through, and you're not going to know that until you pull your stencil up. And then once you've pulled your stencil up, it's going to be almost impossible to get it laid back down in the design that you originally had. So use some sort of spray adhesive, give it some time to basically dry out to minimize any sort of adhesive it will leave on the torso, and then you are good to paint it. Now when I painted this, I used Duplicolor bumper coating, and this is their dark charcoal color. And I did this all in one pass. I didn't do 2 or 3 coats. I just did one coat. And basically, sometimes it can be a little tough to figure out how much you have laid down on your piece. But one way you can kind of get a gauge is you just look at how much paint is being laid down on your stencil itself. As you can see on this side, you know, there's little to no paint. But on this side, where it was actually used, you see the paint. And so to give you a rough idea, I would strongly recommend doing a couple of test pieces before painting this guy, because this can be a little tricky sometimes, and it's better to figure it out before going and painting your piece and not getting what you want and having to start over for one reason or another. So now it's time to lay up some glue in the V here and put the two sides together to give it a bit of a curve. Now when you do this, since it's painted, it is going to be slightly stiff, so you don't want to peel this back too far to get in there when you're trying to glue it. You want to be mindful of that, but you do want to try and get glue down into this corner as deep as possible. So bend it back as far as you feel comfortable, get some glue in there, and lay it up. So now it's time to add the straps to the torso base. So what I have cut out here is 4 strips of 6mm foam. They are each about 13 inches long. And I also have Velcro here that will be glued onto the straps. And all of this will be put together using barge cement. My plan is to do 2 layers on each side to get a good strong bond. And when everything is finished, it will look something like this, like on this torso piece here. So you see you've got one strap here, one strap here, an inch or so of overlap, and roughly 4 or 5 inches of overlap here. You got your Velcro on the inside, all using barge cement. So it's pretty straightforward. You'll need to take your own measurements to make sure that your pieces are long enough and you got some solid overlap on your pieces. But that is basically it for doing the straps.